so as I said, I'm here to talk to you about the Rdm Kits. So a brief outline of what I'll be talking about. So I'm going to first explain what exactly the Rdm Kit is, and then a bit of background on why you should care about what we have in Rdm Kit. So why you should care about producing fair data and why you should care about research data management. And then give a bit more context about why, when, how, and by whom the Rdm Kit was developed. But the large part of my presentation will be about actually making use of the Rdm Kit. So who is it for, how you can use it, and a little bit at the end about how you can contribute if you are interested in contributing.
Daniel, could you please speak a bit louder?
Yeah, I can check my microphone settings as well. Okay, can you hear me well now? So first of all, the Rdm Kit is a web portal, so you can actually check it out for yourself. For the most part, it is self-explanatory, and I'm going to just walk you through what is in there and how it's structured and how it was built. Also, this is not the first webinar we've done on the Rdm Kit. Back before it was officially released, we had another webinar, but I actually found it interesting looking back at this webinar to see how much actually changed in the Rdm Kit since March 1st, because it has been in constant development. So it's, a lot of the things that we had in that webinar are now no longer accurate in terms of the page structure. Still, you should probably check it out if you're interested in learning more of how it was built. So what is the Rdm Kit? The Rdm Kit is an online guide for good research data management practices, with a focus on the life sciences, but not exclusive to the life sciences, in the sense that most of the solutions and practices detailed in the Rdm Kit are actually applicable to other domains. Ultimately, the goal is to support fair data by design. So FAIR, as most of you will probably know, stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and these are four guiding principles that detail how open science should be conducted. And of course, producing fair data is burdensome, but less burdensome if you do it by design. So if you think about making your data fair from the first steps of data management planning until the end of your research project, when you deposit your data in public archives. And that is precisely what we aim to enable through the Rdm Kit. So why should you care about producing fair data? The FAIR principles, their goal is to enable knowledge discovery and data reuse. And in a way, they also contribute to reproducibility, because if you can reuse data, you can also reproduce the experiment that generated. Of course, if you've been to any of my Ready for BioData Management lectures, you'll know that I'm not a big fan of reusability as a principle. I don't think it's really the principle, it's the end goal. The true principle is interpretability. Of course, it wouldn't sound so nice. You wouldn't have a nice acronym like FAIR if you use interpretability. But that is essentially the key principle, because it's interpretability and interoperability that together enable both reproducibility and data reuse. Of course, the world is such that everyone wants to have fair data to use. The problem is that no one actually wants to produce fair data. And this is because the advantages of you as a data producer producing fair data are not really obvious, and there's a lot of work involved in making fair data. So actually, last week I was at the International Semantic Web Conference, and there were two different panel discussions on data reusability and reproducibility. And still, it was not clear to the people leading the discussion why exactly the data producer should be interested in making data fair. But this is something I've given much thought to in the lectures I've given about research data management. And And I think there are 4 key components to this. The first is that if you actually want to contribute to science, your research must be reproducible. If it's not reproducible, you're not producing a scientific output, because you're producing something that no one actually can replicate. Therefore, eventually will completely be forgotten and of no practical use to anyone. Then there is the immediate gain in that if others actually reuse your data, if you make your data reusable, you'll get more citations and you'll possibly get collaborations. And I know this from first-hand experience, not that I'm a data producer, but I am a software producer, and in a sense, software can be considered data. And I've always strived to put my software out there in a public and accessible way with good documentation so that people can use it. And I've actually been surprised at how effective that is at generating citations and collaborations. I mean, there was a student in Brazil who did his master's thesis on developing modules for my tool. And I had no knowledge of this until I actually saw the master's thesis published. So he just used my tool because it was easy to use and easy to develop modules for, and he did his master's thesis on that. And the same can be true of data. So if people use your data to generate other scientific knowledge, then they will cite you and you can get possible collaborations as well. And I think that the most important part of all is that you get to reuse your own data. This is a question I ask often in my data management courses. How many of you can actually reuse data you produced 5 years ago? And even more critical, if you have PhD students working with you, how many of you can continue the work of your PhD students after they leave the lab? If you want to finish a paper that the student was working on, or finish a bit of research that the student was working on, can you actually continue that? For the most case, I think the answer is no. And the answer is no because for the most part, data management practices in research institutions are still very much lacking. And data gets lost, and data is poorly documented, and that impedes that you can reuse even your own data. And of course, there's also the stick. And this, I think, most people are familiar with, and it's probably what brought most of them to the topic of data management recently, is that you actually need to produce fair data to get funded. Funding institutions are requiring, data management plans are requiring that you make your data fair in the end to get funded. Of course, this is the requirement that I'm least interested in, because people that produce fair data just because they have to don't actually produce fair data. They produce data that looks fair, but probably is not fully fair. So in the sense that they document it, but not completely, and they try to make it seem nice and pretty, but in practice, no one can actually reuse it. So the 3 starting principles are the ones I think are most important, the carrots rather than the stick. So why should you care about research data management? Mostly because doing reproducible research and producing fair data is a lot of work, and it's a lot more work if you only worry about it when you're about to publish your data. So adopting good research data management practices can facilitate the work, can ensure that you track your data, you document it accurately and in sufficient detail throughout the data lifecycle, from the start of your experiments, even before the start of your experiments, to the end of your research. And this will improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of your research, as well as data security. It will lead to less cases of loss of data, or loss of software, or loss of experimental details. And it will make your research more productive, because you are finding your own data more quickly, interpreting your own data more quickly, picking up where you left the day before with less effort. So now that I've hopefully convinced all of you that this is important, let's go back to the story behind the Rdm Kit development. So why, when, how, and by whom was it developed? So first of all, a bit of context. So it was developed within Elixir, and Elixir is the European Distributed Research Infrastructure for Data in the Life Sciences, of which BioData stands as the Portuguese node. And within Elixir, there is an ongoing project called Elixir Converge. This is an European project that is devoted exclusively to the topic of research data management, and it includes all 23 Elixir nodes. This project started last year, so in January 2020, right when COVID hit the world. And one of the tasks of this project is developing a data management toolkit. Actually, at the start of the project, people were under the impression that we were going to work on a toolkit to support purely data management planning. But as we started working on it, it became clear that a toolkit just for data management planning would not be very useful nor sufficient for the task of supporting data management activities. So when we started working on the Rdm kits, our premise was that we would have limited resources, so there's actually not a lot of funding in Converge, and we want to build something that's sustainable beyond the Elixir Converge project. And so the premises were working with limited resources and getting contributions from the community, so crowd contributions. We had to devise something that was simple, scalable, and could be sustained by the nodes once the Converge project expired. And so we bet on community contributed development that was steered by an editorial board. So there is a small number of people that are members of the editorial board, and they essentially coordinate the development and the directions of Rdm kits, but the content is for the most part contributed by the community and by experts. And of course, we had to adopt a familiar technical platform that people could easily contribute to. The process of developing has been and will continue to be continuous and incremental. By nature, this is never complete work because we are developing something to support science, and science by its own nature keeps expanding its borders. So we have to come up with new ways to support research, and of course there are technological updates that make the processes easier. Not to mention that data management itself is a research topic, and there are people working on making better data management solutions. And so we have to keep up with both the advances from science and the advances from the data management community to keep a resource that is up to date and useful for the community. And of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of other existing resources that list things that we are interested in. So BioTools lists tools, and many of those tools are interesting for data management activities. Fair sharing lists standards, and most of these standards are interesting for data management activities. Tests lists training materials and training events, and many of those are also relevant for data management activities. The Data Stewardship Wizard is an online tool for data management plan creation, and therefore is deeply tied with data management and Rdm Kit. And Fair Cookbook also lists concrete recipes for making fair data in particular domain problems. And so we, instead of trying to replicate the work that is done by all these external resources, instead we collaborate with them. We will link our resources to them and even work with them in establishing a direct connection between Rdm Kit and some of these resources. So at the center of Rdm Kit, there is a table of tools that links to all these external registries, and that it is linked from the several pages of the Rdm Kit with data management guidelines. So the by whom, there is, as I said, an editorial board that currently consists of 14 members. But as I said, these members essentially coordinate the direction in which we move the Rdm Kit, and also help organize the events in which we ask for input from the community and ask for contributions from the community. The actual content was contributed by currently 82 contributors from across all Elixir nodes. And these include members of the Elixir Data Management Expert Network, which is a network formed at the onset of the Converge project, but also members of the Elixir training community, as well as members of several Elixir communities and platforms. As to the when, we started working on the Rdm Kit in mid-2020. The first official launch of the toolkit was on March 31st, 2021. And since then, we've continued to expand it. So we had an extension of the tool assemblies section, which in the first launch had only one example. We had an extension on June, and we are currently working on the coordination with fair sharing, with TESS, and with the data stewardship wizard to make the connection between these resources and the Rdm Kit deeper. And for the near future, we will be doing the same for the fair cookbook. As to the how, we developed the Rdm Kit on GitHub, so it's a GitHub page structure. And the reason for this is, or the reasons for this are several. So it enables open authoring and review, which is good when we want to have a community effort and people contributing from all over the place. It has versioning and enables contributor credits. It is familiar to a wide community, and it should be sustainable beyond Converge with limited resources. So we actually don't need much aside from a few hours per week of the editorial board. We don't need much resources to sustain this development, as long as we can find people willing to contribute a bit of time to revise and contribute content as well. And of course, it's freely accessible and open source. And actually, the whole Rdm Kit is released under the CC BY 4.0 license. So you can use anything as long as you give us the due credit. So that concludes the story behind the Rdm Kit. Now, a bit on who it's for and how you can use it. So primarily, the goal was to cater for data management and stewards, but also to some extent to researchers, because we acknowledge that in many research institutes, there are no data management experts or stewards available to support researchers, and so researchers have to do the double job of handling their own data management, including drafting data management plans and coming up with their own day-to-day data management solutions in their research projects. And so primarily we cater for the researchers and for the data managers and stewards, but the Rdm Kit is also useful for project coordinators that want to set up data management solutions for a consortium, for example, and also to funding agencies and policymakers who may want to evaluate the MPs or develop open science policies. And actually, shortly after the Rdm Kit was launched, we got feedback from the European Commission that they not only approved of it, but were including it in their guidelines. So it does the job of supporting funding agencies and policymakers. So how can you use the Rdm Kit? As you can imagine, there are many dimensions to data management. So there are a number of issues that are pertinent to address in different stages of research. And so it's a complex problem, and creating a single entry point would be impossible. And so we came up with a structure where you can essentially enter the Rdm Kit through 5 different entry points. So you can enter to the data lifecycle. You can check out a specific role you identify with. You can enter through a specific domain. You can enter to a specific task or problem. You can check out concrete tool assemblies. And in addition to these 5 entry points, we also keep 2 tables of resources, one listing tools and standards, and the other listing training resources. So starting with the data lifecycle, this provides the most general overview of research data management. So if you have zero background and just want to start learning about research data management and best practices, this is probably the place to start. So if you're just curious in exploring, you probably should pick up and start with planning and go from there. So if we delve a bit into the structure of the lifecycle pages, you'll see that they are all about teaching the basics. So in the preserving page, the topics are: what is data preserving, why is it important, and what should you consider at this stage. And this is the same structure across all the other stages, so the same headlines. And then the most important part is that you have a more information section where you link from the data preservation to the tasks that are relevant in this stage, as well as to training materials or courses about this stage. And this works because we are collaborating with the people that run the test training portal to have them use the same tags and the same system of classifying content that we use. And so we can actually link directly our content to their content. So after the stages, which, as I said, provide the basic overview, you can enter through a role. And at present, we have 4 roles. As I said, these are tied to the original goal of supporting data stewards and also researchers. So there is the generic researcher role, and then there are 3 different flavors of data stewards. One about policy, so tied to the policymakers. One about research, so the data steward that supports research activities and works closely with the researchers. And then a last one about infrastructure, so the data steward that works closely with IT and infrastructure providers in making sure that the solutions they provide are adequate to support research activities. So if you look at the structure of these pages, they have a generic description that helps you figure out if you identify with this role, if this is how you perceive yourself and how you want to approach data management activities. A bit more on the focus of this role in research data management activities. And then the key component is the learning path. So, and this lists things that people that identify with this role should seek to, so knowledge that they should seek to acquire, or tools they should be acquainted with, etc., to progress their knowledge inside the context of this role. And again, you'll see a more information section that lists tasks that are related to this role, as well as training material that is related to this role. And finally, it lists tools and resources, and this is a subset of the tools in the full tool table that are tagged with the corresponding role. Moving on to your domain pages. So in your domain pages, we have currently 9 domain pages, and these are aligned with Elixir domains for the simple reason that we mostly gather content from within Elixir by asking Elixir nodes to contribute. But of course, any other research domain is welcome to contribute. It's a matter of getting in contact with us and starting the process of creating a new domain page. So domain pages are about data management problems that affect a particular domain or research community, and of course about the solutions that are adopted to address them. Okay, all pages start with an introduction, and this introduction gives you the context about the domain and focuses on the data management problems that are particular to the domain. So obviously you aren't supposed to learn everything and anything about plant sciences or human data by looking at a page in the Rdm Kit, but you are supposed to figure out what are the data management concerns in these domains. And then we have some latitude in terms of the organization of the rest of the pages. So if you look at human data, they actually decided to organize the content according to different stages. So they cover planning and processing and analyzing and preserving and sharing and reusing, because that was the way that seemed more intuitive for them to list the concerns and the solutions. Whereas, for example, for the plants, we have different sections pertaining to different problems more than different stages. So there's problem of metadata management, the problem of data sharing and deposition. There's a problem of integrating phenotypic and molecular data, which is very particular to this domain. And of course, again, they have more information section that list tasks and training resources, and they have tools and resources that again list the tools and standards that are pertinent to this domain. So, sorry, this is duplicated. So if you look at the section of the pages in more detail, so each of those major topics is organized into a description where you explain the topic. So in this case, it's integrating plant phenotypic and molecular data. And so this explains what are the concerns, why is this a problem, what you need to do. And then considerations that are things you should think about before you look at the solutions. So things you should bear in mind that can lead you to one solution or another. And a list of solutions, many of them potentially listed also in the table of tools below the page. So after domains, you have perhaps the lowest level or the most granular level, which are the tasks. And tasks or problems are essentially concrete data management aspects that you need to address in a research context. So it can be data analysis, it can be making a data management plan, it can be organizing your data or protecting your data or publishing your data, ensuring data quality or data storage or data transfer, reusing existing data, handling identifiers, licenses, documenting your data and providing metadata, and also care with sensitive data. So this list is very likely to be expanded because there are numerous aspects of data management that merit a page of their own. The structure again is up to the individual pages. So there is a lot of latitude into the headers you'll find in each page, because each task comes with its own problems. But they all have a list of tools and standards in the end. So all the tools that are useful for a particular task are listed, and optionally a list of tool assemblies that encompass this task are also listed. So we'll get into the tool assemblies in a minute. So again, if you look at the page in more detail, for example, here we're looking at using a package and environment management system. One of the issues listed in the data analysis page before. The structure is very much the same as we had in the domain pages. So there is a generic description about what this is about, a section of considerations, so things you should bear in mind that should steer you towards one or another solution, and then a list of solutions that often will be also listed in the table of tools below. Finally, we have tool assemblies. And so tool assemblies are concrete combinations of tools and resources that are put together into a workflow for research data management. So in a sense, they are a complete package or a partially complete package for handling data management across the data lifecycle, either in a particular country, for a particular domain, in a particular institution. So, but they are ready-to-use solutions that people can, depending on whether they fulfill the criteria. So, for example, the Norway solution is only available for Norwegian researchers, but Norwegian researchers can just make use of it immediately. And so the structure here is identical to all tool assemblies. So it describes first a description of the assembly, then a description of who can use it. So if it's a national thing or if it's publicly available, what can it be used for? Typically, this includes the stages of the life cycle that are spanned by the tool assembly. And in more information and relevant tools and resources, again, we list the tasks that are related to this tool assembly, potentially also the domains that are related to the tool assembly if it's domain specific. And finally, in the relevant tools and resources, we list the table of tools that are involved in this toolkit. So for example, this is the NELS, so the Norwegian e-infrastructure. It encompasses a number of tools. So they have an instance of data stewardship wizard. They use their own cloud stack, which includes Galaxy for data analysis. They use an instance of Rdm Kit. And so all these are put together in a ready-to-use environment. In the case of the plants, it's more a collection of resources that are usable in tandem, but not really put together in a single place. But it's also a suite of things you should use across the life cycle to ensure that plant data is fair. So finally, for the lists, so there's a list of all tools and resources. And so resources actually here should be standards. So we list both tools and standards, with standards being metadata standards, ontologies, etc. Because training resources are actually listed separately. So this is the aspect of the table that has all tools and resources, but within each other page that lists tools and resources, there will be a subset of this table that has the tag of the corresponding page. So, and this works because we have this tagging system. So it's the tagging system that enables pages to be listed in other pages, either as tools and resources or as related content. In the tools and standards, you have external links. So tools have links to BioTools, standards have links to fair sharing, and all of them can have links for tests if there are training events or materials pertaining to the tool or standard. The all training resources page is very similar. So you have simply a list of the training resources that show up in all pages, and they will have a link to tests if available. So if you consider all of this structure and all the relations between them, this is the graph that we get. So we have life cycle stages that can list training materials and tasks. We have role pages that can also list training materials and tasks. The main pages, some of them can link to life cycle stages if they are about specific life cycle stages, or if specific life cycle stages are more important for the domain page. And they can list also tool assemblies that are relevant for that domain, as well as training materials and tools and standards and potentially tasks. So the main pages are actually the most connected with the rest of the toolkit. Tool assemblies can connect back to domains if they are domain specific and list training and tools. Tasks also list training and tools. Also, tool assemblies may list tasks if they are task specific. And finally, training and tools and standards link out. So training links to tests and tools and standards can link out to fair sharing. BioTools are also tests. And this summarizes our overview of the Rdm Kit. But we also have a section for events and news. It actually lists this very webinar. Finally, I will go over briefly how you can contribute to the Rdm Kit. So as I said, Rdm Kit is a community effort, and the community is open. So we welcome anyone that has insights on data management or particular aspects thereof to either provide feedback on existing pages or add tools, standards, or training materials, or extend existing pages or even contribute new ones. So you can do this spontaneously, but we also host regular content-a-thons, so events where we gather community experts to contribute content. So you can pay attention. These will be announced always in the events section, and usually anyone is welcome to register and participate. So we have a whole section devoted to contributing. We prefer people to contribute via GitHub or Git if you are well versed on command line Git, but GitHub is fine. Google Docs is an alternative mainly for making early drafts of new content, but in general, we avoid Google Docs. So we ask people to contribute to GitHub, but we do have the process very detailed with guidelines that make it straightforward, even for people that aren't familiar with GitHub. So the process is essentially this. So if you want to contribute something, please raise an issue. This will be reviewed by an editor, and the editor will then ask you to write content if that is necessary, or allow you to extend the page or contribute the tool, etc. And then after you create new contents, the editor will assign a reviewer to review that content. The reviewer can be one of the editors as well, and generally is. And the reviewer will then approve that content, update the Rdm Kit. So here's an example of raising issues on GitHub. And you can actually, on each of the pages, find directly an Edit Me button that will take you to the corresponding page on GitHub, which you can edit as well. So all our contributors have credit. So there is a list of contributors accessible through the community page. And in each page, all the contributors are listed in the footer as well. You can also join our editorial board. So the editorial board meets every 2 weeks to handle website housekeeping, to review and prioritize issues, and to discuss future developments. We also make calls for contributions to communities, follow up and kickstart the development process, and we coordinate the write-up in content times and focus groups. So if you are interested in engaging in this process and fostering the toolkit, we welcome you to join us. And that's it for me. I will open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Daniel, for a very clear and interesting talk. And thank you all for listening. We now have time for some questions or comments. Does anyone would like to step in? I think we are not that many, so perhaps we could now switch on our cameras. So Daniel, let me ask you a first question while maybe the rest of the audience is thinking of another. So assume that I am starting to plan my next Horizon 2030 and Horizon Europe call. And I will generate a lot of biological data. So how would you advise me to proceed if I want to use this this data life cycle? So I assume I need to plan, but as you mentioned, I would need to plan that my data will be verified from an early stage. So how should I prepare my proposal? Which tools should I privilege?
So the answer to that is actually in the toolkits, but in short, it depends on your level of expertise. But I think if you have no prior expertise on doing a data management plan, you really should start by taking a look at the data lifecycle and going through the different tasks that are listed here. And we, as I said, we are currently in the process of incorporating deep links between the Rdm Kit and the Data Stewardship Wizard. So the Data Stewardship Wizard is an online tool for making data management plans. And the idea will be that you can go from the Rdm Kit in specific points directly to choices in the Data Stewardship Wizard that will inform your process of making a data management plan. But as a starting point, I think there is no substitute for reading. The Rdm Kit is written in a way has to be accessible as introductory material, specifically the data lifecycle pages, but generically all content should be accessible to anyone, regardless of prior expertise. And I think that will then steer your decisions in terms of data management.
And what if I am a data steward at a research institute?
So in that case, you probably want to start with one of the data steward roles that we have, figure out which of the three is more adequate. So if you are working in a research institute, you probably are either working with researchers or working more closely with the infrastructure providers, so with IT people generating solutions. Probably, I would say realistically in Portugal, a little bit of both. You'll go both toward the researchers and toward the infrastructure providers to find the best data management solutions. And probably you should start with going through the role pages for both data stewards and picking up from there. So looking at the learning path. So I guess I can show you a bit. So you can still see the Rdm Kit page, right?
Yes.
So probably going through this, looking at the focus, figuring out which of these aspects are more important to you, and then the learning path goes to things you need, skills you need to acquire to progress in a career as data steward. And then you have, of course, more information, so things you can read up in the task pages and access to training materials that you could consider, as well as relevant tools and resources. So depending on your level of expertise, I think you will find useful things here regardless, unless, of course, you're already a fully established data steward and know everything, then you probably don't need to learn anything new. But that aside, I don't think there are many cases of data stewards with complete expertise across the whole life cycle and across all domains. You probably have some useful content here to learn from.
Okay, thank you. Any other question for Daniel?
Anna?
Yes, Simon, please.
Hey, Daniel, how are you? I just want to point out I'm wearing my Elixir t-shirt purely by chance. So, yeah, I think that the general information on the kit is really interesting and really useful. But where it really makes a difference, I think, is in the domain-specific stuff. And it was really interesting to see even the domain and country-specific stuff coming from Norway. That's a really useful resource for people living in Norway. And I guess what is possible that we could do for Portugal in such a domain at the moment? Do we have that many domain areas in which we could produce a kind of format for the kit?
Well, I don't think making something domain specific makes a lot of sense. Maybe in the plants, but the plants community, even though there are a lot of people, it's so spread out and so diverse that it's hard to get everyone on board. But I think there are generic solutions that we could provide. I mean, BioData has worked a bit towards that. We have the Dataverse instance that we provided in the expectation that people would actually use it to submit data, but then the feedback we got was that it was too time consuming to document their data. Of course, the solution to that is to have some sort of data brokering between, say, an electronic lab notebook and then a data deposition platform like the Dataverse. And that is something I think we should definitely invest in as a research infrastructure in the next stage of funding. So assuming we actually get structural funding for BioData, that could be an important part of the future directions for data management. So actually coming up with something that could be the Portuguese tool assembly for data management.
Yeah.
Daniel, just let me add that we also have a data steward wizard for BioData.
Yeah, we have tools that in themselves are useful. I think the challenge will be in actually making a connection between them in a way that they are seamless and interconnected, so that people can. Do bear in mind that I think that very nice graph from the Norwegian node is prettier on paper than in reality. So I don't believe it's that seamless for them either, but at least they have a more cohesive infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody else would like to raise a question?
Yes, Anna and Danielle, thank you very much for your presentation. The tool, it's really, really interesting. And as you might know, we have some RDM working groups nationally. We have currently 3 working groups under the coordination of FCT and Universidade do Minho. And I just would like to know if we could make a dissemination of this tool and send some information to its members, because I really think this is aligned with the work that we have been developing. And maybe if Danielle is available in the near future, also participate in a data talk just to give a more brief detail of this tool.
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
we welcome every effort of dissemination.
Okay,
Of
perfect.
course, if you feel inclined to advertise the tool, I mean,
Sure,
we also
sure.
believe in it. We
I will
put in
do
the
that.
effort to work on it, and
Okay, perfect.
I will be glad to participate.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really interesting. I've already opened the tool and I'm exploring it. So perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We
So-
still have.
so on a-
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So on a kind of related note, does anyone know if FCT are going to insist on data management plans for up and coming open calls?
That was the
Yes,
buzz, yes.
Yeah.
It is going to happen, is it?
Well,
Yeah.
let Philippa answer. She's the best
Yeah.
one in
Yeah.
condition to
Kind of
do that.
asking.
Yeah, Simon, we are in usability testing. So we selected the application Argos from OpenAir, and we are going to use it as the national service for the researchers that are going to beneficiate for the funding public. So we are just finalizing the process of testing. So I believe that during this month, we will publish the most recent version of the data management policy that will require the beneficiaries to present a data management plan. And aligned with that, we are going to provide this service. So it's going to be Argos from OpenAir.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
really good. Yeah.
So is João Cardoso working with you now?
Not yet. He's going to join us. He's going to join us on the 22nd of this month. So he's going to give us a great support, I hope, in this process. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If no more questions, then let me thank Daniel for his talk and for his continuous contribution to biodata and Elixir Portugal with all his commitment. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.